Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the waiting chamber. The room was cold. The walls were made of some kind of blue crystal that the Velocians loved so much. She could see her own reflection in them, a small human woman in a simple black uniform. Nothing special, nothing impressive. That was what the other species thought about humans. Nothing special, nothing impressive. Elena took a deep breath. In a few minutes, she would walk into the Grand Council chamber and speak to the leaders of 147 species. These were beings who had traveled between stars when humans still lived in caves. These were empires that had risen and fallen before Earth even had dinosaurs. And she was going to tell them they were all going to die. Her assistant, a young man named David Chen, walked up to her. His face was pale. He was nervous. Elena could not blame him. "Ambassador, are you sure about this?" David asked. "The council does not like bad news. They really do not like bad news from humans." Elena smiled. It was not a happy smile. "I know, David, but someone has to warn them. If we stay quiet, billions will die. Maybe trillions. They will laugh at us. Probably. They will say we are trying to trick them." "Almost certainly." David shook his head. "Then why do it? Why put yourself through this?" Elena looked at her reflection in the crystal wall. She thought about Earth. She thought about the 8 billion people living there. She thought about the colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan. She thought about all the children who would never grow up if the swarm came and no one was ready. "Because it is the right thing to do," she said. "Even if they laugh, even if they hate us for it, we have to try." A soft chime filled the room. The great doors to the council chamber began to open. Bright light poured through the gap. Elena straightened her uniform. She lifted her chin. She walked forward. The council chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with rows and rows of seats rising up on all sides. Each seat held a representative from a different species. Elena could see the Velocians with their shining scales. She could see the Marathi, beings made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. She could see the Kur, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes that watched everything at once. And at the very top, in the largest seat of all, sat High Counselor Thranix. He was Velocian, tall and proud, with scales that shifted between blue and green as he moved. He had been High Counselor for 200 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had negotiated peace treaties between species that had been at war for millennia. He looked down at Elena Vasquez like she was a small bug that had wandered into his home. "Ambassador Vasquez," Thranix said. His voice was deep and smooth. It filled the entire chamber without him needing to raise it. "You have requested an emergency session of the Galaxy Council. This is unusual. In fact, in the entire history of humanity's membership in the collective, this has never happened before." Elena stepped onto the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. She felt very small. She felt very alone, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you, High Counselor. I would not have asked for this meeting if the situation was not serious. What I am about to tell you concerns the survival of every species in this galaxy." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the delegates leaned forward with interest. Others leaned back with obvious boredom. Elena saw one of the Kur delegates cleaning its antenna with complete disinterest. She pressed a button on her control pad. A holographic display appeared above her head. It showed a star map of the galaxy. 6 months ago, Elena began, our deep space monitoring stations detected an unusual signal coming from beyond the galactic rim. At first, we thought it was natural, some kind of cosmic radiation, but then our scientists looked more closely. She pressed another button. The star map zoomed in on a dark region at the edge of the galaxy. Points of red light appeared, thousands of them, then millions. "This is the Kaveth swarm." The murmur in the chamber grew louder. Elena heard several delegates saying the name to each other. Kaveth, Kaveth. The word passed through the crowd like a cold wind. "I see some of you know that name," Elena said. "For those who do not, let me explain. The Kaveth are a species of bioships. They are not like us. They do not build technology. They do not have culture or art or politics. They have only one purpose: to consume. They travel from galaxy to galaxy, eating everything in their path: stars, planets, entire civilizations. Nothing is left behind. High Counselor Threnix raised one clawed hand. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Vasquez, the Kaveth are a legend, a story told to frighten young hatchlings. There has never been any proof that they actually exist. Elena nodded. She had expected this response. You are correct, High Counselor, until now, but we have proof. She pressed another button. The display changed to show a recording. It was grainy and distorted, but the image was clear enough. A massive creature, larger than a moon, was wrapped around a star. It was feeding. Tendrils of plasma were being pulled from the star's surface into the creature's body. Around it, thousands of smaller creatures swarmed. Each one was the size of a city. The chamber was silent now. Even the board delegates were paying attention. This recording was captured by one of our long-range probes, Elena said. The star you see being consumed is approximately 40,000 light-years from here. Based on the swarm's current speed and trajectory, they will reach collective space in approximately 2 years. She let that sink in. 2 years. It sounded like a long time. But in galactic terms, it was nothing. It was tomorrow. We have analyzed the swarm's movement patterns, Elena continued. We have studied the remains of galaxies they have already consumed. And we have developed a plan. She pressed another button. A new display appeared. It showed tactical formations, weapon specifications, fleet movements. The Kaveth are not invincible. They can be hurt, they can be killed, but it requires a coordinated effort. Every species in the collective must work together. We must pool our resources. We must share our technology. And Elena paused. This was the part she knew would cause trouble. We must use weapons that are currently banned under collective law. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted in a dozen different languages. Some stood up in their seats. Others pounded on their desks. High Counselor Threnix had to strike his ceremonial staff against the floor 3 times before order was restored. Ambassador Vasquez, Threnix said, his voice cold, are you suggesting that we abandon the peace that has kept this galaxy stable for 10,000 years? I am suggesting that peace will mean nothing if we are all dead, Elena replied. The Kaveth do not care about our laws. They do not care about our treaties. They will not stop to negotiate. They will simply eat us. A new voice spoke up. It came from one of the Marathi delegates, a being made of purple crystal that chimed as it moved. What weapons are you proposing, Ambassador? Elena took a deep breath. Nuclear weapons, antimatter bombs, kinetic bombardment systems, and a device we call the Shout. The noise in the chamber rose again. Elena heard words like barbaric and savage being thrown around. She heard laughter too. Cruel, mocking laughter. One of the Ildrani delegates, a cloud of yellow gas contained in a special suit, spoke in a buzzing voice. The humans want to use nuclear weapons. How primitive. We gave up such crude tools 1,000,000 years ago. Those crude tools might be the only thing that can save you, Elena said. More laughter. The Kur delegate she had seen earlier made a clicking sound that its translator rendered as amusement. Ambassador Vasquez, High Counselor Threnix said, I understand that your species is young. I understand that you still carry the scars of your violent past, but the collective has evolved beyond such things. We have weapons far more advanced than your nuclear bombs. If the Kaveth truly exist, we will deal with them using civilized methods. Elena felt her patience slipping. She had prepared for this. She had rehearsed staying calm, but the arrogance in the chamber was almost too much to bear. High Counselor, with respect, your advanced weapons will not work against the Kaveth. We have run the simulations 1,000 times. Energy weapons cause minimal damage to their bioarmor. Precision strikes are useless against a swarm that numbers in the billions. The only thing that works is overwhelming, destructive force. The kind of force that your civilized methods have forgotten how to use. Threnix stared at her for a long moment. His scales flickered between blue and dark purple. Elena knew enough about Velossian body language to recognize anger. Are you saying that humans are better warriors than species who have been fighting wars since before your son was born? Elena wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell him that humans had been fighting for survival from the moment they climbed down from the trees. She wanted to tell him that while his species was building crystal palaces and composing poetry, humans were inventing 1,000 different ways to kill each other. And in doing so, they had learned something that the elder species had forgotten. War was not about being civilized. War was about surviving. But she did not say any of this. Instead, she simply said, "I am saying that we have experience with a kind of fighting that you have not needed for a very long time, and that experience might save us all." High Counselor Threnix stood up. He was very tall. His shadow fell across Elena like a dark cloud. "The Council will now vote on the human proposal. All delegates in favor of allowing human military forces to enter collective space and deploy banned weapons. Please indicate." Elena looked around the chamber. She saw one hand go up. 2, 3. That was all. All delegates opposed? Hundreds of hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages rose into the air. The vote was not even close. Threnix looked down at Elena with something that might have been pity, or maybe it was just contempt. "The motion is rejected. Furthermore, the Council hereby bans all human military vessels from collective space. Your weapons are too dangerous. Your tactics are too unpredictable. Until you learn to behave like a civilized species, you will remain behind your borders." Elena felt the words hit her like physical blows. They were not just rejecting her plan. They were imprisoning humanity, locking them away like dangerous animals. "High Counselor," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "if you do this, billions will die. Perhaps trillions. When the swarm comes, you will not be able to stop it alone." Threnix made a dismissive gesture with one clawed hand. "The swarm, always the swarm. Ambassador Vasquez, your species has been in space for less than 500 years. You have seen nothing. You know nothing. The threats you imagine in the darkness are simply that. Imagination. The collective has faced dangers before. We will face them again. And we will do so without your primitive weapons and your savage tactics." He struck his staff against the floor once more. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. "This session is closed." The delegates began to file out. Some of them glanced at Elena as they passed. Most of them were smiling. A few of them were openly laughing. One of the Kerr delegates paused long enough to make that clicking sound again. "Humans," it said, "always so dramatic about extinction. Perhaps you should focus on not driving yourselves extinct before you worry about the rest of us." Elena stood on the platform and watched them leave. She stood there until the chamber was empty. She stood there until the lights began to dim. David Chen was waiting for her in the hallway outside. His face was even paler than before. "Ambassador, what do we do now?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. She was thinking about the simulations. She was thinking about the swarm. She was thinking about the billions of beings who had just laughed at her warning. "We go home," she said finally. "We prepare our defenses. We get ready for what is coming." "And the collective?" Elena started walking toward the shuttle bay. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. "We wait," she said. "We watch. And when they finally realize they are wrong, when they finally call for help, we answer." David hurried to keep up with her. "You really think they will call?" Elena thought about High Counselor Threnix. She thought about his confidence, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that he knew better than the young, primitive humans. "They will call," she said. "The only question is how many will be left alive when they do." She reached the shuttle and stopped at the door. She turned to look back at the council building one last time. It was beautiful. Tall spires of crystal and metal reaching toward the sky. A monument to 10,000 years of peace and prosperity. Elena wondered how long it would stand once the swarm arrived. "Send a message to Earth," she told David. "Tell them to begin preparations for Directive Omega. Full deployment. All assets." David's eyes widened. "Directive Omega? Ambassador, that is." "I know what it is." Elena stepped into the shuttle. "And when the time comes, the galaxy will know too." The shuttle doors closed. The engines hummed to life. Elena Vasquez left the collective capital behind and began the long journey home. In the council chamber, a single light still burned. High Counselor Threnix stood at the window, watching the human shuttle disappear into the sky. His aide, a young Velocian named Shrell, stood beside him. "Do you think she was telling the truth?" Shrell asked. "About the swarm?" Threnix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The humans are always telling stories, Shrell. It is how they cope with being such a young and frightened species. They see monsters in every shadow. But the recording could easily have been faked. The humans are quite clever when it comes to technology. It is one of the few things they are good at." Shrell was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What if it is real? What if the swarm is truly coming?" Threnix turned away from the window. His scales had settled back to their normal blue-green pattern. He looked calm, confident, sure of himself. "Then we will deal with it," he said, "as we have dealt with every threat for the last 10,000 years. The collective is strong, Shrell. We do not need humans and their barbaric weapons to protect us." He walked toward the door, his ceremonial robes flowing behind him. "Come, I have a dinner engagement with the Marathi ambassador. Something about a new trade agreement, much more important than human fairy tales." Shrell followed his master out of the chamber, but at the door he paused. He looked up at the great dome of the ceiling, at the stars painted there in precious metals. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, something was moving. Something hungry. Shrell shivered. Then he hurried after High Counselor Threnix, trying very hard not to think about monsters in the dark. But the monsters were not interested in what anyone thought about them. They were coming, and they were very, very hungry. 6 months passed after the council meeting. 6 months of quiet, 6 months of waiting. On Earth, humanity prepared. Factories that had been sleeping for centuries came back to life. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels started building warships instead. Young men and women who had never held a weapon began training for combat. But they did it quietly. They did it behind their borders. They did it where the collective could not see, because the collective was watching. After the council vote, they had placed monitoring stations all along human space. They said it was for safety. They said it was to make sure the dangerous humans did not cause trouble. But everyone knew the truth. It was a cage, an invisible prison. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to Earth and spent her days in the command center, buried deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland. She watched the screens. She read the reports. She tracked the swarm's movement across the galaxy. And every day she sent one message to the collective government: request permission to assist, awaiting response. The response was always the same: silence. On the Marathi homeworld, a planet of crystal spires and singing towers, life continued as normal. The Marathi were artists. They were poets. They were musicians. They had not fought a war in 50,000 years. They had forgotten what war even looked like. High Chancellor Vexira stood in her garden, watching the twin suns set over the crystal mountains. The light played through the peaks and filled the sky with colors that had no names in any other language. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was the last sunset she would ever see. The first warning came at midnight, a signal from the outer monitoring stations. Something was entering the system, something big. "How big?" Vexira asked her aide. The aide's crystal body flickered with nervous patterns. "We are not sure, Chancellor. The sensors are having trouble getting an accurate reading. It appears to be everywhere." Vexira felt a cold sensation spreading through her crystalline form. She remembered the human ambassador. She remembered the recording she had shown. She remembered laughing along with everyone else. She was not laughing now. "Contact the collective fleet," she ordered. "Tell them we need immediate assistance." The collective fleet was the pride of the galaxy. 2,000 ships from 50 different species, the most advanced technology in the known universe. They had never lost a battle in their entire history. They arrived at the Marathi system in 12 hours. Admiral Kress, a Velocian with battle scars from conflicts most species had forgotten, took personal command. He studied the sensor readings. He analyzed the enemy formation. He planned his attack. "This will be simple," he told his officers. "The swarm is large, but they are primitive. Bioships cannot match our energy weapons. We will cut through them like a knife through water." The battle began at dawn. It lasted 17 hours. When it was over, the collective fleet was gone. 2,000 ships reduced to scattered debris drifting through space. Admiral Kress died on his bridge, still shouting orders to ships that no longer existed. His last words were a prayer to gods his species had stopped believing in long ago. The swarm did not pause to celebrate. The swarm did not rest. The swarm simply continued doing what it always did. It fed. The crystal cities of the Marathi homeworld shattered under the assault. The singing towers fell silent forever. 8 billion Marathi died in a single day. Their beautiful world was stripped bare, consumed down to the core, leaving nothing behind but a dead rock floating in space. High Chancellor Vexira was one of the last to die. She stood in the ruins of her garden, watching the sky fill with monsters, and thought about the human ambassador. "We should have listened," she whispered. Then the darkness took her. On Velos Prime, High Counselor Threnix received the news in his private chambers. His aide Shrell brought him the report on a datapad, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "The Marathi homeworld is gone, High Counselor. The collective fleet has been destroyed. The swarm is moving toward the Cure Hive worlds." Threnix stared at the datapad. His scales had gone pale. For the first time in 200 years, he did not know what to say. "How is this possible?" he finally managed. "Our fleet was the most powerful in the galaxy." The swarm does not fight like we expected, High Counselor. They do not care about our tactics. They do not fear our weapons. They simply keep coming. No matter how many we kill, there are always more. Threnix thought about the human ambassador. He thought about her warning. He thought about how he had dismissed her, how he had laughed at her. He thought about calling Earth. But no, not yet. The collective still had resources. Other fleets, other weapons. They did not need human help. They could handle this themselves. "Assemble the emergency council," he ordered. "Recall all reserve fleets. We will mount a defense at the Cure Hive worlds. This time, we will be ready." Shrell nodded and hurried away. But as he left, he glanced back at his master. He saw something in Threnix's eyes that he had never seen before. Fear. The defense of the Cure Hive worlds was the largest military operation in collective history. 12 fleets from 60 different species, orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons, everything the collective could gather in the short time they had. It was not enough. The swarm came like a wave of darkness. They did not attack in formation. They did not follow any pattern that made sense. They simply swarmed. Billions of bioships, each one hungry, each one relentless, each one willing to die if it meant getting closer to its prey. The Cure fought with everything they had. Their insectoid bodies were designed for combat. Their compound eyes could track 1,000 targets at once. Their hive mind allowed them to coordinate perfectly, moving as one organism across the battlefield. But the Kaveth were a hive mind too, and their hive was older, bigger, hungrier. The Cure Hive worlds fell in 3 days. Then came the Ildrani gas giants, the Selvek mining colonies, the Thorin agricultural worlds. One by one, the systems of the collective went dark. One by one, the distress signals fell silent. And through it all, from behind their borders, humanity watched. In the command center beneath the Swiss mountains, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different part of the galaxy. Each screen showed death and destruction on a scale that was hard to comprehend. "How many?" she asked quietly. General Marcus Stone stood beside her. He was old, his hair gray, his face lined with years of worry. He had been a soldier for 50 years. He had seen terrible things, but nothing like this. Estimates put the death toll at approximately 400 billion, Ambassador, and counting. Elena closed her eyes. 400 billion. The number was too big. It did not feel real, but it was real. Every one of those numbers had been a living being. Every one of them had had hopes and dreams and fears, and now they were gone. "Have we heard from the council?" she asked. "No, Ambassador. They are still maintaining the ban, still refusing to acknowledge our messages." Elena opened her eyes and looked at the screens again. She watched a planet die. She watched a species disappear. She watched and did nothing because she was not allowed to do anything. "Keep sending the message," she said. "Every day, every hour if we have to. Request permission to assist. awaiting response. Ambassador, General Stone hesitated. Our forces are ready. Directive Omega is standing by. The fleet could be deployed in a matter of hours. Why do we not just go? Why do we wait for permission from people who are clearly losing? Elena understood his frustration. She shared it. Every part of her wanted to give the order, to send the fleet screaming into battle, to show the swarm what humanity could do. But she could not. Because we are not barbarians, General. No matter what they think of us, we do not invade. We do not conquer. We do not force our help on people who do not want it. If we did, we would be exactly what they fear. Stone shook his head. And if they never ask? If they are too proud? If they let themselves be wiped out rather than admit they were wrong? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, then they die. And we remember. And we make sure it never happens again. It was a hard answer. A cold answer. But it was the only answer she had. The weeks passed. The death toll climbed. 500 billion, 600 billion, 700 billion. Species that had existed for 100,000 years vanished overnight. Cultures that had created wonders beyond human imagination were erased. Libraries containing the collected wisdom of countless generations were burned to ash and scattered to the void. And still the collective did not call. High Counselor Threnix watched from his command ship as the swarm advanced toward Velossian space. He had abandoned Velos Prime 3 days ago, when it became clear that the planet could not be defended. His people were fleeing in every direction, their ancient ships packed with refugees. But there was nowhere to flee to. The swarm was everywhere. Every system they turned to was either already dead or about to die. Threnix sat in his command chair and stared at the tactical display. The display was mostly red now. Red for lost, red for dead, red for consumed. There was almost no blue left. Shrell approached him carefully. The young aide had aged a decade in the past few weeks. His scales were dull and cracked. His eyes were hollow. High Counselor, the humans are still sending messages. Threnix did not respond. They say they are ready to help. They say their fleet is standing by. They just need us to ask. Still no response. High Counselor. Threnix, please. We have to do something. We are running out of options. We are running out of time. Threnix finally looked at his aide. For a long moment, he just stared at him. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had lost everything and had nothing left but bitter amusement. Do you know what I told them, Shrell? When the human ambassador came to us with her warning? I told her that humans were young and frightened, that they saw monsters in shadows, that we had faced greater threats and survived. He looked back at the tactical display. I was so certain, so proud, so stupid. Shrell waited. The humans tried to save us, Threnix continued. They came to us with proof of the danger. They offered their help, their weapons, their lives, and we laughed at them. We banned them. We locked them away like criminals. He stood up from his chair. He was still tall, still imposing, but something had broken inside him, something that would never be fixed. Open a channel to Earth. Shrell's eyes widened. High Counselor? Do it. Before I change my mind. The connection took several minutes to establish. When Ambassador Vasquez appeared on the screen, she looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago. Calm, professional, patient. High Counselor Threnix, she said, this is unexpected. Threnix tried to speak. The words caught in his throat. He had spent 200 years giving orders, making decisions, leading his people. He had never had to ask for help. He had never had to admit he was wrong, but there was no other choice. Ambassador Vasquez, he said. His voice was rough. We require assistance. Elena nodded. She did not gloat. She did not remind him of how he had treated her. She simply said, what do you need? Everything. Anything. The swarm is approaching the Thesser system. Our remaining forces are regrouping there for a final stand. But we do not have enough ships. We do not have enough weapons. We do not... He stopped. He took a breath. We do not know how to fight something like this, but you do. You always did. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Directive Omega is already en route. Estimated arrival, 4 hours. Threnix blinked. Already en route? But we only just called. A ghost of a smile crossed Elena's face. We have been waiting, High Counselor. We have been ready for 6 months. The moment you called, we launched. Threnix felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was hope. A small, fragile thing, but real. What do you need from us? He asked. Evacuate all personnel from the Thesser system, military and civilian, everyone. Evacuate. But that is where our fleet is gathering. That is where we plan to make our stand. I know. That is also where the swarm's main fleet is heading. And when we arrive, you do not want to be anywhere nearby. Threnix thought about arguing. Old habits were hard to break. But then he looked at the tactical display again. He looked at all the red. He remembered all the species who had been so confident, so proud, so certain that they knew better. They were all dead now. Very well, he said. We will evacuate. Ambassador, thank you. Elena shook her head. Do not thank us yet, High Counselor. Thank us when it is over, if any of us are still alive to thank. The screen went dark. Threnix turned to Shrell. For the first time in weeks, he looked like something other than a defeated old man. Signal the fleet. All ships are to withdraw from the Thesser system immediately. Maximum speed. Shrell hesitated. But High Counselor, if we withdraw, the swarm will have a clear path to the inner systems. There will be nothing to stop them. Threnix looked at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, humanity was coming with their banned weapons, their savage tactics, their barbaric fury. There will be something to stop them, he said. The humans are coming, but there are so few of them. How can they possibly fight the entire swarm? Threnix remembered the human ambassador. He remembered her quiet confidence, her refusal to be intimidated, her absolute certainty that she was right. He had thought it was arrogance. Now he understood. It was something else entirely. It was experience. I do not know how they will fight, he admitted. But I know this. They have been preparing for this moment for a very long time, and whatever they are bringing, I think the swarm is about to learn something that we learned too late. What is that, High Counselor? Threnix turned away from the viewport. That sometimes the young and primitive species are the most dangerous of all. Far away in the cold void of space, 200 human warships burned toward the Thesser system. They were smaller than the collective ships, less elegant, less beautiful, but they bristled with weapons. Weapons that had been banned for centuries. Weapons designed not for precision or efficiency, but for raw, overwhelming destruction. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral James Okonkwo watched the tactical display. He saw the swarm, 20,000 bioships, each one the size of a city, converging on the Thesar system. They were hungry. He smiled. Let them come, he said softly. We have been hungry too. Hungry for this chance. Hungry to show them what we can do. He stood up from his command chair. All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. In 4 hours, we will engage the Kaveth swarm. Many of us will not survive. But those who do will be remembered forever. Not just by humanity, but by every species in this galaxy. He paused. They laughed at us. They called us primitive. They locked us away like animals. Today we show them who the real predators are. The fleet roared in response. 200 ships, 40,000 crew members, all of them ready to die. But they were not planning to die alone. The swarm had consumed galaxies. It had devoured civilizations. It had never known fear. That was about to change. The Thesser system had 3 planets. None of them were particularly special. A gas giant, a frozen rock, a small world that had once been used for mining but had been abandoned centuries ago. There was nothing here worth fighting for, but it was where the Kaveth swarm had gathered, and so it was where humanity would make its stand. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the UNS Prometheus and studied the tactical display. The swarm filled the screen. 20,000 bioships. Some were small, only a few hundred meters long. Others were massive, the size of small moons. And at the center of the formation, barely visible even to the most powerful sensors, was the Queen. Every swarm had a queen. She was the heart of the hive mind, the central intelligence that controlled billions of individual organisms. Kill the queen, and the swarm would fall into chaos. The problem was getting to her. "Status report," Okonkwo said. Commander Sarah Park, his second-in-command, answered without looking up from her console. "All ships at combat readiness, Admiral. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Crews are standing by. Directive Omega packages? Loaded and ready. Nuclear warheads, antimatter torpedoes, kinetic bombardment systems. We have enough firepower to crack a planet." "And the shout?" Park hesitated. "Ready, sir. But are you sure you want to use it? We have never tested it in combat. We do not know what effect it will have." Okonkwo smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "That is exactly why I want to use it. They do not know what effect it will have either." He turned to the communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Chen. "Open a channel. All ships. Channel open, Admiral." Okonkwo straightened his uniform. He was a tall man, dark-skinned, with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from a dozen forgotten battles. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought pirates and rebels and everything in between. But this was different. This was not a battle for territory or resources or political power. This was a battle for survival, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. "All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. In approximately 10 minutes, we will engage the Kaveth swarm. I am not going to lie to you. Many of us will not survive this day. The enemy outnumbers us 100-1. They are bigger than us, faster than us, and they have been consuming civilizations for longer than our species has existed." He paused. "But we have something they have never faced before. We have humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day since we climbed down from the trees. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed hundreds of millions. We split the atom and walked on other worlds. We have spent our entire existence fighting for survival against impossible odds." He looked at the swarm on the tactical display. "Today, we fight again. Not for ourselves, but for every species that laughed at us. Every species that called us primitive. Every species that locked us away because they were afraid of what we might do. They were right to be afraid. Not because we are monsters, but because we know something they forgot a long time ago." His voice hardened. "War is not about honor. It is not about glory. It is not about being civilized. War is about survival. War is about doing whatever it takes to ensure that your people see tomorrow. The Kaveth have no morality, no mercy, no restraint, and today, neither do we." He gave his final order. "All ships, engage." The Terran emergency fleet surged forward, 200 ships moving as one, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They did not hold formation like the collective fleets had. They did not maintain careful distances or coordinate precision strikes. They charged. The Kaveth swarm detected the approaching fleet. The hive mind processed the information and found it confusing. And these ships were small. There were not many of them. Why were they attacking? Why were they not fleeing like all the other species had? The swarm did what it always did. It turned to consume. 20,000 bioships oriented toward the human formation. They began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Their mouths opened. Their tendrils stretched out. They were hungry. The first human missiles launched at a distance of 1 million kilometers. The swarm did not recognize them as a threat. The collective had used missiles too. Precise, elegant weapons designed to hit specific targets. Easy to dodge, easy to absorb. These missiles were different. The first wave hit the front of the swarm and detonated. Nuclear fire bloomed in the void. Not precision strikes against individual ships, but massive explosions designed to destroy everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. The Kaveth screamed. 100 bioships died in the first second, then 100 more, then 1,000. The chain of explosions spread through the front ranks of the swarm like a disease, each detonation triggering the next, each blast adding to the carnage. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Okonkwo watched the tactical display update. Red dots disappearing, blue numbers climbing. First wave impact confirmed. Enemy casualties estimated 1,200 and climbing. 1,200 out of 20,000. It was a start. Launch second wave. Kinetic bombardment. The Prometheus shuddered as her railguns fired. Simple metal rods, each one a meter long, accelerated to nearly the speed of light. They had no warheads, no explosives. They did not need any. At that velocity, a metal rod carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. The kinetic rounds punched through the swarm like needles through flesh. They did not stop when they hit a bioship. They continued straight through, leaving massive holes in their wake, and slammed into the ships behind them. And the ships behind those. One rod killed 17 bioships before its momentum finally stopped. The swarm was confused. This was not how warfare worked. The other species had attacked with energy weapons, lasers and plasma bolts and particle beams, weapons that could be absorbed or reflected or dodged. These humans were not using energy weapons. They were using matter, simple, brutal, physical matter. And it was killing the swarm in ways they had never experienced. But the swarm was still the swarm. It had numbers. It had hunger. It had 1 billion years of evolution designed for one purpose: consumption. The bioships that survived the initial assault pushed forward. They surrounded the human fleet, coming from every direction at once. Their tendrils reached out, grasping for the small metal ships that had hurt them so badly. The first human ship to die was the UNS Jakarta, a destroyer, 150 crew members. A massive bioship wrapped around her and began to squeeze. The hull crumpled like paper. But as the Jakarta died, she fired one last shot, a single antimatter torpedo aimed directly into the mouth of the creature that was killing her. The explosion vaporized both ships and everything within 100 kilometers. Captain Rodriguez of the Jakarta left a final message. "Tell my family I love them, and tell the swarm they can choke on our bones." More human ships began to fall. The swarm was adapting, learning how to avoid the nuclear explosions, how to dodge the kinetic rounds. They came in waves, overwhelming the human defenses through sheer numbers. But for every human ship that died, it took 10 bioships with it. On the bridge of the Prometheus, alarms were blaring. The tactical display was chaos. Crew members were shouting reports that Okonkwo could barely hear over the noise. Enemy ships approaching from Vector 379. Shields down to 40%. The Delhi is gone. The Singapore is taking heavy damage. Okonkwo stood in the center of it all, calm as a statue. He had known this would happen. He had planned for it. "Navigator, take us into the heart of the swarm. Full speed." Commander Park spun around. "Sir, that is suicide." "Maybe, but we are not here to survive, Commander. We are here to win." The Prometheus lurched forward, her engines screaming as she plunged into the densest part of the swarm. Bioships swarmed around her, their tendrils scraping against her hull. Warning lights flashed on every console, but Okonkwo was not looking at the bioships. He was looking at the center of the formation, at the Queen. "There she is," he said softly, "the heart of the beast." The Queen was massive, 10 kilometers long, her body covered with armored plates and pulsing organs. She hung in space like a dark goddess, surrounded by her children, watching the battle with 1,000 eyes. She had never been afraid. In 1 billion years of existence, she had consumed worlds and stars and galaxies. Nothing had ever posed a real threat to her. But as she watched the human fleet fight, as she felt her children dying by the thousands, something new stirred in her ancient mind. Curiosity, and something else, something she did not have a name for. It felt like the beginning of fear. "Admiral," Lieutenant Chen said, "we are detecting a signal from the Queen. She is trying to communicate." Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. "The Kaveth can talk." "It is not really talking, sir. More like projecting images and emotions directly into our minds. She wants to know why we are not running." "Tell her we do not run." "Sir, I am not sure I can." "Then show her." Okonkwo pressed a button on his command console. "All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. Prepare to deploy the Shout." The Shout was humanity's secret weapon. Not a bomb, not a missile. Something far stranger. Over the centuries, humans had collected recordings. Every war cry ever screamed on a battlefield. Every battle hymn ever sung by soldiers marching to their deaths. every scream of defiance from people who refused to surrender, every roar of fury from those who had nothing left to lose. 10,000 years of human rage and determination compressed into a single electromagnetic pulse. When the collective banned human weapons, they had focused on the physical dangers, the nuclear bombs, the kinetic rounds, the antimatter warheads. They had not even considered that sound could be a weapon. That was a mistake. "The shout is ready, Admiral," Park reported, targeting the Kaveth hive mind frequency. Okonkwo looked at the Queen on the tactical display. He thought about all the species she had consumed, all the civilizations she had destroyed, all the billions of lives she had ended. "Fire!" The Prometheus broadcast the signal. Every ship in the fleet amplified it and rebroadcast it. The sound wave expanded outward at the speed of light, carrying with it the concentrated fury of humanity. The Queen heard it first. It hit her mind like a physical blow. Suddenly, her consciousness was filled with screaming. Not the screaming of the dying, which she had heard countless times. This was different. This was the screaming of those who refused to die. She saw images, humans fighting with sticks and stones against animals that should have killed them. Humans building walls against floods and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Humans dragging themselves through ice and fire and poison to reach safety. She saw wars, millions of humans slaughtering each other over land and resources and ideas. She saw cities burning. She saw bodies piled higher than mountains. And through it all, she felt something she had never felt from any prey species before. Not fear, not despair, not acceptance, defiance. These creatures did not want to survive because survival was pleasant. They wanted to survive because something deep in their souls refused to give up. They would fight to the last breath. They would fight beyond the last breath. They would burn themselves to ash rather than submit. The Queen tried to process this information. Her billion-year-old intelligence, honed by consuming countless civilizations, struggled to understand. And for the first time in her eternal existence, she flinched. The swarm felt their Queen's confusion. The hive mind that bound them together flickered. For one terrible moment, they were not one organism, but billions of individuals, each one alone, each one vulnerable. The human fleet exploited that moment without mercy. "All ships," Okonkwo ordered, "maximum firepower. Everything we have, now." 200 ships opened fire at once. Nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds, antimatter torpedoes, plasma beams. Everything humanity had brought was unleashed in a single devastating volley. The swarm shattered. Bioships died by the hundreds, then by the thousands. The Queen, still reeling from the shout, could not coordinate her children. They scattered in every direction, fleeing from the destruction, fleeing from the screaming in their minds. For the first time in their existence, the Kaveth knew fear, and they did not know how to handle it. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Okonkwo allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was working. The shout had broken the hive mind's unity. Now they just had to press the advantage. But the Queen was still alive, and she was recovering. "Admiral," Park said, her voice tight, "the enemy is regrouping. The Queen is reasserting control." Okonkwo saw it on the display. The scattered bioships were slowing, turning, reforming. The hive mind was stabilizing. In a few minutes, the swarm would be whole again, and the human fleet was badly damaged. 60 ships destroyed, another 50 crippled. They had hurt the swarm badly, but not badly enough. They needed to kill the Queen. "Navigator," Okonkwo said, "plot a course directly for the Queen's position. All remaining ships, form up on the Prometheus. We are going in." Park grabbed his arm. "Admiral, that is a suicide run. Even if we reach her, we do not have the firepower to kill something that size." Okonkwo smiled. It was the smile of a man who had accepted his death and was at peace with it. "We do not need to kill her, Commander. We just need to hurt her badly enough that she cannot recover. And I know exactly how to do it." He looked at his crew. These men and women who had followed him across the galaxy, who had trusted him with their lives. "You all know what we are about to do. Anyone who wants to leave, the escape pods are available. No one will think less of you." No one moved. Lieutenant Chen was the first to speak. "Sir, I speak for everyone when I say We did not come this far to run away. If we die today, we die fighting, and we take as many of those bastards with us as we can." The bridge crew cheered. It was not a loud cheer. They were tired and scared and hurt, but it was real. Okonkwo nodded. "Then let us go kill a queen." The remains of the Terran emergency fleet formed up behind the Prometheus. 80 ships, 30,000 crew members, all of them knowing they were about to die. They did not hesitate. They charged. The queen saw them coming. She was fully recovered now, her hive mind restored, her children ready to fight. She watched the tiny human ships racing toward her, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Respect. These creatures were not like the others. They did not surrender. They did not beg. They did not flee. They fought with everything they had, even when they knew they could not win. In a billion years, she had never encountered anything like them. It almost made her sad that she had to destroy them. Almost. She gathered her remaining forces, 15,000 bioships, battered but still deadly. She sent them forward to intercept the humans, and the final battle for the Thesser system began. The emergency bunker on Velos Prime was deep underground, miles of rock and metal between the survivors and the surface. It was the safest place on the planet. Maybe the safest place in the galaxy. It did not feel safe. High Counselor Threnix sat at the center of a long table. Around him were the survivors, the leaders and ambassadors who had escaped the swarm's advance. There were not many of them. A handful of Velocians, a few Ildrani in their containment suits, 2 Kur who had somehow survived the destruction of their hive worlds. No Marathi. The crystal beings had been wiped out completely, an entire species erased from existence. The table had been designed for 147 delegates. Now it held fewer than 20. Threnix stared at the empty seats. Each one represented a species that no longer existed, a culture that had been consumed, a history that had been erased, because he had not listened. His aide Shrel approached carefully. The young Velocian was holding a data pad, and his hands were shaking. "High Counselor, we are receiving a transmission from the Thesser system. It is a recording." Threnix looked up. "A recording? From the battle?" "Yes, High Counselor. The human ships had automated systems that continued broadcasting even after the crews were—" He could not finish the sentence. "Show me," Threnix said. The lights in the bunker dimmed. A holographic display flickered to life above the table. For a moment, there was static. Then the recording began. The first thing they saw was the swarm. 20,000 bioships filling the screen, massive, hungry, endless. Then they saw the human fleet, 200 tiny ships barely visible against the vastness of the enemy. One of the Kur delegates made a clicking sound. "This is madness. They are outnumbered 100 to 1. What do they think they are doing?" No one answered. They just watched. The human ships began to move. Not retreating, not taking defensive positions. They were charging straight at the swarm. "What are they doing?" the Kur repeated. "That is not tactics. That is suicide." The first missiles launched. The recording showed them streaking toward the swarm, small dots of light against the darkness. Then they detonated. The bunker filled with blinding light. The delegates shielded their eyes as nuclear fire bloomed across the screen. Not one explosion. Not 10. Hundreds, thousands. When the light faded, the front of the swarm was gone. 1,000 bioships vaporized in seconds. One of the Ildrani ambassadors let out a hissing sound. "Those are nuclear weapons. We banned those centuries ago." "They banned them," another delegate corrected. "We banned them." The recording continued. The human fleet pushed deeper into the swarm. More missiles, more explosions. Bioships dying by the hundreds. But the swarm was adapting. They were surrounding the human fleet, coming from all directions. The delegates watched as human ships began to die. The Jakarta, the Singapore, the Mumbai. One by one, they were overwhelmed. Yet even as they died, they took enemies with them. Every human ship that fell took 10 bioships with it, sometimes more. "How are they doing this?" Shrel whispered. "Their ships are so small. Their technology is so primitive. How are they killing so many?" Threnix understood. He understood in a way that made his heart ache. Because they do not care about living, he said. They only care about winning. They are willing to die if it means taking the enemy with them. We are not like that. We fight to survive. They fight to destroy. The recording showed the Prometheus plunging into the heart of the swarm. Bioships swarmed around her, their tendrils scraping against her hull. Warning lights flashed on the screens. Then the shout was deployed. The delegates did not hear the sound. The recording was visual only, but they saw its effect. The swarm flinched. Thousands of bioships suddenly scattered, their coordinated movements becoming chaotic. The hive mind that had bound them together was disrupted. "What was that?" the Kerr delegate demanded. "What did they do?" Threnix shook his head. "I do not know, but whatever it was, it hurt them. It hurt them badly." The human fleet exploited the moment. Every remaining ship opened fire at once. Nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds, antimatter torpedoes. The combined firepower was staggering. The swarm shattered. For a moment, the delegates allowed themselves to hope. The humans were winning. Against impossible odds, they were actually winning. Then the recording showed the swarm regrouping. The Queen was recovering. Her children were reforming around her. And the human fleet was badly damaged. 60 ships destroyed. Another 50 crippled. Out of 200, only 80 remained. The delegates watched in silence as the human survivors formed up behind their flagship. They were not retreating. They were not calling for help. They were charging again, straight at the Queen. "They are going for her," Threnix said. "They know they cannot kill the entire swarm. So they are trying to kill the Queen. Cut off the head and the body will die." "But they cannot reach her," Shrell said. "There are 15,000 bioships between them and her. They will be destroyed." "Yes," Threnix agreed. "They know that." The final charge of the Terran emergency fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 80 ships against 15,000. 30,000 humans against billions of Kaveth organisms. It should have been a slaughter. It should have been quick and brutal and one-sided. It was a slaughter. But not the kind the swarm expected. The human ships did not try to dodge or evade. They simply plowed forward, their weapons firing constantly. Every time a bioship got close, it was hit with nuclear fire or kinetic rounds or point-blank antimatter explosions. The swarm threw everything they had at the humans. Massive tendrils, acid sprays, biomissiles. The human shields failed. Their hulls cracked. Their engines sputtered and died. But they kept moving. The recording showed ship after ship reaching the end of its life. But instead of surrendering, instead of trying to escape, the crews aimed their dying vessels at the nearest bioships and triggered their self-destruct systems. Every human ship became a weapon. The Berlin rammed into a bioship 3 times her size and detonated her antimatter core. The explosion took out 20 enemy vessels. The Cairo lost all power and drifted helplessly until a bioship tried to consume her. The crew waited until they were completely inside the creature's mouth, then triggered every nuclear warhead on board at once. The Tokyo had her bridge destroyed in the first minute of the charge, but her engines still worked. The surviving crew members steered her using manual controls, flying blind until they crashed directly into one of the Queen's escort ships. 30,000 humans died in that charge. Almost none of them died running. Almost none of them died surrendering. They died fighting, screaming, clawing for every inch of space, and they died taking the enemy with them. By the time the Prometheus reached the Queen, only 12 human ships remained, 12 out of 200, 6,000 survivors out of 40,000. But they had killed over 10,000 bioships. The swarm's numbers had been cut in half. The Queen was vulnerable. The recording showed Admiral Okonkwo on the bridge of the Prometheus. He was wounded. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His uniform was torn and burned, but his voice was steady. "All ships, target the Queen. Everything we have left, on my mark." The 12 surviving ships oriented toward the massive creature at the heart of the swarm, their weapons charged, their crews prepared for one final attack. Mark! 12 ships fired at once. Nuclear missiles, antimatter torpedoes, kinetic rounds, every weapon they had. The Queen tried to dodge. She was too big, too slow. The weapons hit her along her entire length, Explosions ripped through her armored hide. Fire poured from wounds in her ancient flesh. She screamed. The sound was not audible in space, but the delegates felt it through the hive mind link that the recording had somehow captured. It was a sound of pure agony, pure shock, pure disbelief. In a billion years, the queen had never been hurt like this. She had never felt pain like this. She had never known that such pain was possible, and she was not done suffering. The Prometheus, her weapons exhausted, her shields gone, her hull breaking apart, aimed herself directly at the largest wound in the queen's body. Admiral Okonkwo looked at his crew. "It has been an honor serving with you." Then he gave his final order. "All hands, brace for impact. We are going to give that monster the worst indigestion of her life." The Prometheus hit the queen at full speed. She penetrated deep into the creature's body, her reinforced prow slicing through organs and tissue, and then she detonated. Not just her self-destruct charges, not just her remaining weapons. She detonated a device that the collective had never seen before. A weaponized singularity. A miniature black hole. The explosion was unlike anything in the recording. It was not light. It was darkness. A sphere of absolute nothing that expanded from the center of the queen's body, consuming everything it touched. The queen tried to escape. She could not. The singularity held her in place, pulling her toward its heart. She screamed again, louder this time, and then she began to die. The recording showed her massive body collapsing in on itself. Bioships all around her went mad as the hive mind link was severed. They crashed into each other. They fled in random directions. They simply stopped moving, their controlling intelligence gone. The queen of the Kaveth swarm, the eternal devourer, the consumer of galaxies, died in the Thesser system. She died with a human ship buried in her heart. The recording showed the aftermath, the scattered remains of the swarm, leaderless and confused, the debris of human ships drifting through space, the slowly fading singularity that had killed the queen. And then a voice, damaged and distorted, but recognizable. Commander Sarah Park. "This is Commander Park of what is left of the Terran emergency fleet. The queen is dead. The swarm is broken. We have won." A pause. "Admiral Okonkwo is gone, along with most of our people. Human casualties, 63%. Enemy casualties, 100%. The Kaveth swarm that attacked the collective has been destroyed." Another pause, longer this time. "We did what we came to do. We saved them. Even though they laughed at us. Even though they banned us. Even though they called us barbarians and primitives. We saved them anyway." Her voice cracked. "Because that is what humans do. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Even when they do not deserve it. Even when they do not want our help. We fight anyway." The recording ended. The bunker was silent. 20 delegates sat in darkness, staring at the empty display. Threnix was the first to move. He stood up slowly, his old body aching, his heart's pounding. "They sacrificed 63% of their fleet," he said, "for species that laughed at them." No one responded. 25,000 humans died today. They died fighting creatures that most of us believed were legends. They died using weapons we banned, tactics we called barbaric, and they won. He looked around the table, at the empty seats, at the survivors, at the shame on their faces. "I called them young, frightened, primitive. I told them they saw monsters in shadows. I was so proud of our ancient civilizations, our advanced technology, our peaceful ways." He laughed bitterly. "And when the real monsters came, it was not our ancient civilizations that stopped them. It was not our advanced technology. It was not our peaceful ways. It was humans. Humans with their nuclear bombs and their savage tactics and their absolute refusal to die quietly." A new voice spoke up, calm, controlled, familiar. "You are correct, counselor, though I would not say we refuse to die quietly. We simply refuse to die without a fight." Everyone turned. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the bunker. She had been there the entire time, watching the recording with them. Threnix stared at her. "Ambassador, how long have you been here?" Long enough, she walked toward the table. Long enough to hear you finally understand what we tried to tell you 6 months ago. Shrell stepped forward angrily. You had no right to be here. This is a private meeting of collective survivors. Elena looked at him with something that might have been pity. Young one, there is no collective anymore. The collective died when the swarm consumed it. What you have now is survivors, refugees, and you will need to decide very quickly what you want to do next. Threnix raised a hand to silence his aide. What do you mean? Elena pulled out a data pad. The queen is dead, but the swarm is not. There are other queens, other fleets. They are out there in the dark, between galaxies, and they will eventually learn what happened here. When they do, they will come to investigate and to avenge. The delegates exchanged frightened looks. How long do we have? Threnus asked. Unknown, could be years, could be decades, could be centuries. But they will come. And humanity, will you help us again? Elena was quiet for a moment. She thought about the 25,000 humans who had died in the Thesser system. She thought about Admiral Okonkwo, buried forever in the heart of a dead monster. She thought about all the families on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. We will help, she said finally, because that is who we are. But things will be different now. The rules will change. The bans will be lifted, and you will learn to fight like we do. We do not know how to fight like you, one of the Kerr delegates said. We have forgotten. It has been too long. Elena smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was warmth in it. Then we will teach you. We have 10,000 years of experience in violence, in survival, in doing whatever it takes to see tomorrow. We did not want to share that knowledge with you. We hoped you would never need it. She looked at the empty display where the recording had played. But you need it now, and we will give it to you. All of it. The good and the bad. The strategies and the costs. The victories and the nightmares. She turned back to Threnix. No more laughing. No more bans. No more treating us like dangerous children. From now on, we are partners. We will fight together. We will bleed together. And if necessary, we will die together. Threnix stood up straight. For the first time since the swarm arrived, he looked like the leader he had once been. Agreed, he said. On behalf of what remains of the collective, I accept your terms. And I offer an apology. For what we said, for what we did, for our arrogance and our blindness. Elena shook her head. Save your apologies. Apologies do not bring back the dead. What matters now is what we do next. Are you ready to work? Threnix looked at the other delegates. One by one, they nodded. We are ready, he said. Good. Elena moved to the head of the table. Then let us begin. We have a lot of work to do, and not much time to do it. The delegates leaned forward, ready to listen, ready to learn, ready for the first time to accept that they did not know everything. Far away in the darkness between galaxies, something stirred. A distant queen felt a ripple in the cosmic web, a signal of distress, a cry of death. Her sister was gone. The queen was confused. Her sister had been ancient, powerful, eternal. Nothing could kill her, but something had. The queen reached out with her mind, searching for answers. What had killed her sister? What could possibly have that much power? The answer came slowly, carried on the fading echoes of the hive mind. Humans. The queen processed this information. She had never heard of humans before. They must be a new species, a young species. But they had killed a queen. That meant they were dangerous. The queen began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Behind her, billions of bioships stirred from their long sleep. They would find these humans. They would study them. They would learn their weaknesses, and then they would consume them. It was what the swarm did. It was what the swarm had always done. But somewhere in her ancient mind, the queen felt something she had not felt in millions of years. Caution. These humans had killed a queen. They had fought like nothing the swarm had ever encountered. They had screamed their defiance into the void and refused to surrender. Perhaps, the queen thought, they would be more difficult to consume than expected. Perhaps they would be worthy prey. She was looking forward to finding out. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Tsar. 1 year since humanity had saved the galaxy. 1 year since everything changed. The council chamber had been rebuilt. The old one, on the collective capital world, had been abandoned. The planet was too close to the edge of known space, too vulnerable, too full of ghosts. The new chamber was on Earth. It was smaller than the old one. The galaxy had fewer species now, fewer voices, fewer representatives. But it was still impressive in its own way. The walls were made of white stone quarried from the mountains of a continent called Europe. The dome overhead was made of glass, showing the blue sky and white clouds of humanity's homeworld. High Counselor Threnix stood at the entrance and looked up at that sky. He had never seen a blue sky before. His own world had orange skies. Most worlds in the galaxy had no sky at all. It was beautiful, he thought. Strange and alien, but beautiful. His aide Srel walked up beside him. The young Velocian had changed a lot in the past year. His scales were duller, marked with stress patterns that would never fully fade. But his eyes were clearer, wiser. High Counselor, the delegates are assembling. It is almost time. Threnix nodded. I know, I was just admiring the view. Srel looked up at the sky. It is very different from home. It is. The humans say that their sky changes color throughout the day. Blue in the morning and afternoon, orange and red at sunset, black at night, filled with stars. That sounds confusing. Threnix smiled. It was a sad smile. I think that is why they became the way they are. Their world never stops changing. It never lets them get comfortable. They had to learn to adapt, to survive anything. Is that why they fight so hard? Perhaps, or perhaps it is just their nature. Some species are builders. Some are thinkers. Humans are survivors. It is written into their very bones. Srel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I am glad they are on our side now. So am I, young one. So am I. They entered the chamber together. The new council had only 32 delegates. That was all that remained of the 147 species that had once filled the old chamber. Some species had been completely wiped out. Others had lost so many members that they could barely function. A few had simply given up, retreating to remote corners of the galaxy to wait for the end. But these 32 had chosen to stay, to fight, to rebuild. The seats were arranged in a circle now, not a bowl. There was no high platform for important delegates, no special section for elder species. Everyone was equal. That had been one of Ambassador Vasquez's conditions. No more laughing at the young ones, she had said. From now on, everyone's voice matters equally. Threnix took his seat. Around him, the other delegates were settling into their places. He saw Velocians and Ildrani and Kur. He saw species he had barely known before the war. And he saw humans. Quite a few humans, actually. They had earned their seats with blood. The main doors opened. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked in. She had changed too. Her hair was grayer. Her face was more lined. She walked with a slight limp now, a souvenir from an accident during the refugee evacuation. But her eyes were the same. Sharp, intelligent, determined. She was no longer just an ambassador. After the Battle of Thessar, the surviving collective governments had voted to give humanity a new role. Not just a member of the Alliance, not just a defender, the leader. Elena Vasquez was now the chair of the Collective Defense Coalition, the most powerful position in the galaxy. She had not wanted it. Threnny knew that. She had argued against it for weeks. Humans should not rule others, she had said. We should be partners, not masters. But the other species had insisted. They needed someone strong to guide them through the dark times ahead. Someone who knew how to fight. Someone who could stand against the horrors waiting in the void. They needed a human. Elena took her seat at the head of the circle. She did not sit on a throne or a raised platform. She sat in a chair just like everyone else. That was another one of her conditions. This meeting of the Collective Defense Coalition is now in session, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. First order of business, status report on reconstruction efforts. A Kur delegate stood up. Her compound eyes glittered in the chamber's soft light. Production facilities in the Kur sectors are operating at 60% capacity. We expect to reach full capacity within 2 standard years. Military shipyards are being rebuilt according to human specifications. Human specifications? Another delegate asked. What does that mean? The Kerr clicked her mandibles. It means our new ships will carry nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, antimatter warheads, and the shout projection array. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The shout was still a sensitive topic. Many species found it disturbing that sound could be weaponized, that rage and defiance could be turned into a weapon. But they had seen what it could do. They had watched the recording of the Battle of Thessar. They had seen the swarm flinch. They were learning to appreciate the disturbing things. Elena nodded. Good. What about training programs? A Velossian military officer stepped forward. He was younger than Threnix, with bright green scales and eager eyes. Human instructors have been assigned to all major military academies. They are teaching our officers what they call unconventional warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, scorched earth strategies. And how are the students responding? The officer hesitated. It is difficult for some of them. The concepts go against everything we were taught. We were taught that war should be clean, precise, honorable. The humans teach that war should be won, at any cost. Some of my students have had breakdowns, another officer added. Aeldrani, his gaseous body swirling with anxious colors. The simulations are too intense. The scenarios are too brutal. They cannot handle it. Elena's expression did not change. Then they should find other jobs. We do not have time for soldiers who cannot handle reality. The next swarm is coming. It will not care about our comfort. The chamber was silent. Several delegates looked away. They knew she was right. They just did not like hearing it. Threnix stood up slowly. All eyes turned to him. If I may speak, Chair Vasquez? Elena nodded. Of course, High Counselor. Threnix looked around the chamber, at the 32 delegates, at the empty seats where 115 more should have been sitting. 1 year ago, I stood in a different chamber and listened to a human tell us that we were all going to die. I laughed at her. We all laughed at her. We called her primitive, fearful, paranoid. We told her that our ancient civilizations and advanced technology would protect us. He paused. We were wrong. Our ancient civilizations burned. Our advanced technology failed. Everything we believed in was swept away like dust in a storm. And when the darkness came, when the monsters emerged from the void, it was not our wisdom that saved us. It was human fury. He walked to the center of the circle. I want to propose a motion. I want us to preserve the recording of the Battle of Thessar, not just in one archive, but in every archive, on every world, in every language, forever. A Yildrani delegate spoke up. For what purpose, High Counselor? It is a painful memory. Many of us lost friends and family in that battle. That is exactly why we must preserve it, Threnix said. Not as propaganda, not as a celebration of violence, but as a reminder of what happens when we become too comfortable, too proud, too certain that we know everything. He turned to face Elena. We laughed because we had forgotten what it means to fight for survival. The humans never forgot. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day, and they won. When we told them their methods were too violent, we were not protecting civilization. We were protecting our own illusion that violence was beneath us. Elena listened without expression, but Threnix saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or appreciation. He continued. Your species carries a burden that we abandoned long ago. The willingness to become monsters so that others do not have to. You walked into the fire for us. You burned for us. And now you carry scars that will never fully heal. He bowed his head. In Velossian culture, it was the deepest form of respect. We can never repay what you have done, but we can remember, and we can make sure that our children remember, and their children, and their children, until the end of time. The chamber was silent. Elena stood up slowly. She walked to the center of the circle, facing Threnix. We are not monsters, Counselor. We are just the ones who remember that the universe does not care if you are civilized. It only cares if you survive. She looked around at the delegates. All of you had peaceful societies once, beautiful cultures, great art and philosophy and science. You thought you had moved beyond violence, beyond war, beyond the primitive need to fight and kill and survive at any cost. She shook her head. You were wrong. Violence is not something you move beyond. It is something you prepare for, something you hope you never need. But when you do need it, when the darkness comes and there is nothing left but teeth and claws and desperate fury, you had better be ready. She reached out and placed her hand on Thrennick's shoulder. It was a human gesture of friendship, of connection. We will teach you how to fight, not because we want you to become like us, but because we want you to survive. Because somewhere out there, in the dark between galaxies, more swarms are waking up. More queens are rising, and they are all very, very hungry. A Kerr delegate raised one of her forearms. Chair Vasquez, I have a question. Ask. You said the universe does not care if we are civilized, but you also risked everything to save us. You sacrificed 25,000 of your people for species that had mocked and banned you. That seems like caring. Elena smiled. It was a complicated smile, sad and proud and tired all at once. We do care. That is the paradox of humanity. We are capable of terrible violence, but we choose to use it to protect others. We could have stayed behind our borders. We could have watched you die and then prepared our own defenses. Some of our leaders argued for exactly that. She looked down at her hands. But we did not, because we believe that strength is not just about fighting, it is about knowing when to fight and who to fight for. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, even when they do not deserve it, even when they do not want our help. She raised her eyes again, looking at each delegate in turn. We are not heroes. We are not saviors. We are just stubborn. Too stubborn to let the darkness win without a fight. Too stubborn to give up on people who laughed at us. Too stubborn to die quietly. General Marcus Stone, who had been standing silently at the edge of the chamber, stepped forward. His uniform was covered with medals now. Honors from a dozen species, titles he had never wanted. If I may, Chair Vasquez. Go ahead, General. Stone addressed the council. Some of you have asked why humans fight the way we do, why we are willing to die so readily, why we do not surrender even when defeat is certain. He pulled out a small data crystal and held it up. This is a copy of something we call the Human Legacy Archive. It contains recordings of every human who died in the Battle of the Tsar, their final messages, their last words. He inserted the crystal into the chamber's display system. A holographic image appeared, a young human woman, her face bloodied, her eyes bright. My name is Lieutenant Maria Santos of the UNS Delhi. The ship is going down. We are all going to die. But we took 30 of those bastards with us. 30. My grandmother survived the Rio earthquake when she was 6 years old. My grandfather walked across a desert with no water to escape a war. My parents lived through the Martian plague. We do not die easily, my family, and we do not die alone. The image faded. Another appeared, an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. Captain James Okonkwo Jr., UNS Cairo, named after my uncle who died fighting pirates at Ganymede. He told me once that the Okonkwo family has been fighting and dying for 1,000 years. We fought in wars whose names are forgotten. We bled for causes that nobody remembers, but we always fought, and we always won. Even when we lost, we won. Because winning is not about surviving. It is about making sure the other side knows they cannot beat you. They can kill you, but they cannot beat you. More images, more faces, more final words. A young engineer who spent her last minutes making sure her ship's self-destruct would work properly. A doctor who stayed with his patients even as the hull breached around him. A cook who picked up a weapon he had never used and charged into the breach when the soldiers were all dead. 25,000 stories, 25,000 last stands. When the final recording ended, the chamber was utterly silent. Several delegates were openly weeping. Others were simply staring at nothing, lost in thoughts they could not express. Stone turned off the display. That is why we fight, he said quietly. Not because we are brave, not because we are strong, but because giving up is not in our nature. We are the descendants of people who survived ice ages, and plagues and wars and disasters. The weak ones died. The ones who gave up died. We are what is left. The stubborn ones, the survivors. He looked at Elena. She nodded. High Counselor Threnix, Stone said, you propose that the Battle of Thesar should be remembered forever. I propose something additional, that the Human Legacy Archive be part of that memory. Every face, every name, every final word. Threnix bowed again. I support this proposal. Let their names be written in stone. Let their faces be preserved in crystal. Let their words echo through every generation until the stars go dark. Elena stepped forward. The motion is on the table. All in favor? Every hand, claw, tendril, and appendage in the chamber rose. The motion carries unanimously. The Battle of Thesar and the Human Legacy Archive will be preserved forever. She paused. There is one more matter to discuss, the naming of our new alliance. Threnix spoke up. I propose we call it the Terran Pact, in honor of the world that saved us. Several delegates nodded in agreement, but Elena held up her hand. I appreciate the gesture, but I have a different suggestion. We should not name it after Earth. We should name it after what we are trying to build. Not a human empire, not a collective controlled by any one species, but a partnership, a fellowship of survivors. She looked around the chamber. I propose we call it the Phoenix Coalition. In human mythology, the phoenix is a bird that dies in fire and is reborn from the ashes. We have all burned. We have all lost. But we are still here, and we are rising again. The chamber considered this. Threnix found himself nodding slowly. A phoenix, a creature that could not be destroyed, that came back stronger every time it fell. Yes, that was exactly what they needed to be. All in favor of the Phoenix Coalition? Elena asked. Every appendage rose again. Then it is decided. From this day forward, we are the Phoenix Coalition, and we will never be caught unprepared again. The meeting continued for several more hours. Military budgets, research initiatives, refugee resettlement, reconstruction priorities, 1,000 small details that would shape the future of the galaxy. When it was finally over, the delegates filtered out of the chamber. Most of them went to dinner meetings or working sessions. The work never really stopped anymore. Elena and Threnix were the last to leave. They stood together at the entrance, looking out at the night sky of Earth. The stars were brilliant. More brilliant than Threnix had ever seen from his own world. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one a sun. Each one potentially hosting worlds like this one. And somewhere out there, in the dark between galaxies, the swarm was waiting. Do you think we can really stop them? Threnix asked. The next swarm? The one after that? How many are there? Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she said, we do not know. Maybe dozens. Maybe hundreds. Maybe they are endless. Maybe they will keep coming until the universe ends. That is not a comforting thought. No, it is not, but it does not matter. Threnix looked at her. How can you say that? If they are endless, if they can never truly be defeated? Elena smiled. That same complicated smile he had seen in the council chamber. Because we do not fight because we know we will win. We fight because it is right. Because someone has to stand in the darkness and hold the line. Because somewhere out there, in one of those billions of stars, there are species that have not even evolved yet. Civilizations that will not exist for 1,000,000 years. Children who will never be born unless someone is here to protect them. She looked up at the sky. We fight for them, for the people we will never meet, for the worlds we will never see, for the future we will never know. That is what it means to be a guardian. That is the burden we carry. Threnix considered this. It was such a human way of thinking, so strange, so selfless, so stubborn. You really are a remarkable species, he said. We are survivors, Elena replied. That is all. Survivors who refuse to give up. Survivors who will fight until the very end. And even then, we will probably keep fighting out of pure spite. She laughed. It was the first genuine laugh Threnix had heard from her since the Battle of Thesar. Come, she said. The Coalition Council is meeting for dinner. You should try human food. It is strange, but you might like it. Threnix followed her toward the building. Behind them, the stars shone cold and bright in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, monsters were waiting. But here on Earth, in this chamber built of stone and glass and hope, the survivors were preparing. The Phoenix Coalition was rising, and the galaxy would never be caught unprepared again. Far away at the edge of known space, a monitoring station detected a faint signal. It was weak, barely perceptible. The kind of thing that old instruments might have dismissed as cosmic background radiation. But the new instruments were better, human-designed, built to catch exactly this kind of anomaly. The technician on duty, a young Velocian named Keltrix, studied the readings. He ran them through the analysis software 3 times. Then he picked up his communication device and sent an urgent message to Coalition Command. Priority alert. Possible swarm signature detected at coordinates 773 by 215. Signal strength minimal but consistent. Recommend increased surveillance of sector. The message was received, analyzed, forwarded to the appropriate authorities. On Earth, General Stone read the report and nodded grimly. They are coming, he said to his aide. Not yet, not soon, but eventually. Should we inform the council, sir? Stone shook his head. Not yet. No point in causing panic over a faint signal, but increase patrols in that sector. Upgrade the monitoring stations and make sure our people are ready. Ready for what, sir? Stone looked out the window at the night sky. Ready for anything. The next war was coming. It might be years away, it might be decades, but it was coming. And when it did, the Phoenix Coalition would be ready, because that was what survivors did. They survived, no matter what, forever.